This happened about 9 years ago. I was living with a roommate at the time in a townhouse in a suburb of Denver. My boyfriend at the time had always been kind of abusive, with the occasional slap or pinning me down on the floor. But after a family member that he was really close to passed away, he really lost it. My ex, Pierce, lost it in the middle of an argument one day about a week after the funeral and threw me on the ground, punching my arm over and over, until there was a giant bruise on one shoulder and a handprint-shaped bruise on the other. My face also ended up being swollen and I had a bloody lip. My roommate called the police and he ended up being arrested and a no-contact order was put in place. He was also ordered to go to counseling and maybe drug/alcohol meetings, even though at the time he didn't use. Fast forward a few months, I'm living with this roommate because I was completely financially dependent on him. She's taken it upon herself to pay for me to get my GED. That woman is a saint. I just need to throw that out there. And a lot of my time was spent on studying for the subjects. After everything, I was very agoraphobic, but I even managed to forge some online friendships and maybe even something more with a genuinely kind guy. One day, Pierce's grandmother stopped by to take me to pay my phone bill. She lived close by in the same townhouse complex and it was more or less right behind where I lived. I remember it being the first beautiful and slightly warm day after a long winter, so I opened all of the blinds to let the sunlight in, and I left them open when I left. After paying my phone bill, Pierce started calling her. I wasn't too concerned because I knew that he was supposed to be at his court-mandated counseling shortly. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but his grandmother told him that we had just stopped at McDonald's. Again, not really an issue at this point. I continued to eat my Big Mac or whatever until maybe 3 minutes later, Pierce calls again. His grandma tells him that she's probably going to be home in about 10 minutes, and the call ends. I finish my food and we leave. Again, in the car, as I'm maybe 2 minutes away from where I live, Pierce calls again. I still can't hear his side of the conversation, but his grandma tells him the intersection we just passed, and suddenly, I have this terrible sinking feeling in my stomach. I know something is wrong, and I can't identify what, but I know in my fear of hearts that something is terribly wrong. I considered asking his grandma for help, but for context, his grandmother, on multiple occasions, watched Pierce hit me or try to strangle me, and openly expressed disgust at how I can't really help but piss him off. Anyway, his grandma pulls in front of where I live, and I notice all of the blinds I had opened are now closed. We go inside, and once she leaves, I walk upstairs to my room and see a random Word document open on my computer. Pierce has written a whole page worth of shit, but I only pay attention to the big words at the top. I read your emails. Immediately, I knew that he had seen the emails between me and the guy I'd met. Even though they weren't outright sexual or flirty, you could kind of tell there was something there between us. My brain stopped reading at this point, and I needed to figure out if he was still in the building. Because there's a no-contact order, I know he would have come through the back door, so nobody would see him. So my mind latches onto this idea that if the back door is locked, he's probably gone. I run downstairs to the door and see that it is locked. But as soon as I reach the door, I hear a closet sliding open from the room I was just in. Loud and angry footsteps, and he's yelling my name. I know that this may sound weird, but I can't recall exact details. I remember his face in mind before I could understand what was happening. I also remember being back up in that room again, I think to go through all of my emails with him, and I remember him slapping me hard in the face, over and over until I was dizzy. I remember somehow convincing him to let me use my phone to respond to one of my roommate's texts. I don't remember what I said, but I remember that she called right away. And I also remember Pierce standing 2 feet away from me and looking at me, believing he was going to kill me, and my roommate asking me, "Are you safe?" I only said, "No." She told me that she was on her way, and she'd be here as fast as she could. Eventually, Pierce became convinced that I had called the police, and with a knife in his hands, told me that if they were coming anyway, that he might as well give me what I deserve. I managed to convince him that I didn't call the police, and then he started crying about what a terrible person he was. So with a handprint on my swollen face, I tried to convince him that he wasn't terrible, and to please not do anything stupid until my roommate came home. Insane ex-boyfriend, I moved states and had my name changed, etc. Let's not meet ever again. I bought a kind of small condo, 900 square feet, back in August of 2021. I had recently gotten out of a bad relationship where my ex verbally and physically abused me, then stalked me back in the summer of 2020. and charges were filed against him by the state after one incident where he strangled me. I was still in the middle of it all when I bought this place, expecting to have to testify against him in the next few months, October-ish 2021. But I was happy to get away from my old house because my ex used to send me pictures of my car wherever I went for months after the night he strangled me. And obviously he knew where my house was and that I lived there. So it was a fresh start. I already had a restraining order against him with a registered address being at my house. I didn't change the restraining order address to my new condo because then he would legally be notified of my new address since he has to stay 300 feet away from it. And I felt it was safer for me not to do that. I also have a walking restraining order, so he can't come within 300 feet of me either. I moved into my condo, got a new car, and changed how I looked a little, and I was lying low. Please note that the stalking stopped in December of 2020 when he allegedly got a new girlfriend. I was thrilled, but obviously still scared, so moving was my last step to comfort me. Anyways, in September of 2021, I'm alone in my new home on the couch in the living room. I'm FaceTiming my best friend. Now, my condo was a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom, and a small office, and it's ground level. The back porch, which is off of the living room, had been enclosed at some point and turned into the office. So the door to the office is a sliding glass door, and then the door from the office to the back public area is also a sliding glass door. So I'm sitting in the living room right next to the thankfully closed and locked glass door to the dark office, and the blinds were closed. I hear a loud bang from the office and I froze. The hair on the back of my neck stood up and I just felt I was no longer alone. I told my friend someone was trying to break in and I ran into the kitchen to grab a knife and I ran to the front door to lock it. I was petrified, frozen in place, just silent. Then the doorbell rings. I jumped out of my skin. I look out of the peephole and it's a guy I had been seeing for a while. I forgot I had invited him over. I let him inside and I asked him like 3 times if he had tried to come in the back door, and he swore that he didn't. Then he also grabbed a knife and went to investigate and told me to call the police. When he went into the office, the back door wasn't locked, but there was a dowel in the door track, which allows the door to open maybe 2 to 3 inches until it makes a loud bang, like the one I heard. Within reach of the back door is my work desk, and my water bottle had been moved outside somehow. Someone was trying to break in, and I assumed moved my water bottle to scare me. The cops came and found big footprints and big handprints on my bedroom window, which verified that it wasn't the guy I was seeing, who has relatively small hands and the footprints did not match. So they probably tried the window first. When I say I was scared shitless, I mean it. Someone definitely tried to get to me. I tripled my security after this. I got a camera out front and put up a "You're on camera" sign in every window, and I put up alarms that go off when the door separates from the wall, and also for the windows. I slept with one eye open for a few weeks. I was seriously chilled to the bone. Fast forward a few months, me and the guy I was seeing were now dating, and he is basically living with me. I felt a lot safer, and I'd almost forgotten about that night. I also have a gun now, and he taught me how to be safe with it, and I kept the back door locked. My boyfriend and I go out of town in February, and had a friend watching my cat. This friend is a total health nut. She never eats anything outside of her meal prep. This will come up later. We spent a few days at a ski resort and everything was all good. My friend checked on my cat once a day, as well as the house. I could see her coming and going on the camera. We get home after a long trip and I immediately go to the pantry to get my big bag of Skittles that I love to eat every night and that I didn't have on the trip. But they were nowhere to be found. Gone. I thought it was weird at first, but I figured my friend maybe snatched them. But then I remembered, I have never seen that girl eat anything besides chicken and rice. I texted her and asked, and she said no, that she doesn't eat candy. I let it go and bought more the next day at the store. Then like 2 weeks later, I went to do my nightly ritual of grabbing my Skittles after a long day at work. And there are now 2 open bags on my shelf in the pantry. I wish I was making this up, but it did not sit well with me. My boyfriend even came home and said, "Oh, you found your Skittles." And I explained to him that I didn't know how they got there. We kind of brushed it off. Now 2 weeks ago, we leave town again just overnight. We went to his parents' house about an hour away. Camera was on, but we did notice something when we got home. We had Amazon packages that my camera did not catch being delivered. I was never notified. My camera is positioned just above the front door and looks all the way down the carport walk-up area to the street. It's a motion sensor and usually catches people driving by, but not catch the delivery man walking the 15 feet to our door stacking our packages and walking away. Again, I didn't think much of it. We just go inside. Before we left for this trip, I was playing the Xbox in the bedroom. We also have a Roku connected to the TV, but we hadn't used it all day that day. So we go inside, and we go into the bedroom, and my boyfriend turns on the TV. The Roku was on, and opened on a random streaming app, paused in the middle of some random movie. We both looked at each other, thoroughly confused. It was a free movie, so no login was necessary. I freaked out. My boyfriend tried to justify or explain that maybe the cat had chewed on the remote, but that did not make sense to me. She has never done that. I felt my soul leave my body. I just felt like someone was in my home. To make things even more weird, in my bathroom drawer, I have tiny little organization bins with ponytails, floss sticks, and Q-tips, etc., and I restock them every few months. Today it was time to restock them. I'm very organized, and I know when I need to buy things, and I know when I'm running low on my supplies that I pull from under the sink. I went to find the Q-tips and the floss sticks, and they are gone. I bought 1,000 Q-tips in December. There is no way I used them all by April. Don't even get me started on the floss sticks. I know I had more. My boyfriend now believes me 100% and is really starting to get worried. I don't know how someone could have gotten in. Either the camera is faulty or someone has a key to the back door and has been able to figure it out. I feel sick and I feel like someone is messing with us. I thought maybe I was sleepwalking, but that doesn't explain the Skittles or the Roku. I've checked for secret hiding spots, false walls, and everything. I'm truly freaked out, and I thought I'd bring it here to get some opinions. I would not put it beneath my ex to be doing this. He served 10 days in jail for what he did to me, and is a free man living out there right now. I think that's why this is getting to me. Am I being paranoid, or can anyone think of any explanation here? My husband works night shifts sometimes. I wasn't too bothered by it until the other night. We live in a fourplex, one beside and two behind, all on a single level. Since I'm not working yet, I'm pretty familiar with the comings and goings of my neighbors. Heck, I even know what everyone's car sounds like. It was probably just after midnight, and I was talking to some friends over Skype when I hear the door handle jiggle. At first, I thought maybe my husband was home early and got up to greet him, and quickly realized I hadn't heard his work boots on the gravel or his car. I went really still, and I kept listening, just in case I was mistaken. Finally, I yelled, "Hello?" Just silence. Then I heard something in the lock. My husband likes me to be protected, so he bought us a couple guns. I grabbed the shotgun and I pumped it once. It's loud enough without actually pumping ammo, and that you know what it is. Then I yelled, "I have a gun, and I know how to use it. Get lost before I call the police." Big heavy footsteps ran across our graveled lot, and I stayed up the remainder of the night until the sun came up. Then I finally fell asleep. My husband came home later that morning, and the next day he had off. We went to visit some of his friends. When we got back, we discovered the pumpkins I had next to the steps were all knocked over, like someone was looking for a key. My husband did a quick sweep of the house before he went in, but we're looking for a new place now. So I live in a major city in Texas. My apartment complex is gated and in a good neighborhood, but the security isn't extremely tight. Sometimes the gates are left open and anyone could piggyback off of someone else entering with the access code. Maybe twice in the past 3 years, the management has put out notices of vehicle break-ins or other items being stolen from porches. We also have frequent door-to-door solicitors, even though there are signs forbidding it. Okay, so this particular Friday evening, I go to bed about 2:30 a.m. For some odd reason, I was having trouble getting to sleep, so I put on a podcast to listen to, and eventually I start to doze off. I become aware of a noise that sounds like a clicking sound, but it sounds like one of my upstairs neighbors making some noise. I kind of zone this out, as I'm used to my neighbors staying up late on weekends. After about 30 seconds, I realize the noise is extremely repetitive, and even getting louder. I then start focusing on it more intently, trying to isolate what it could be, and where it's coming from. Suddenly it hits me. It's coming from the entrance to my apartment. I leap out of bed and I head to the foyer. I identify the noise right away. The lock mechanism is moving back and forth rapidly, like someone is trying to unlock the front door. I can hear that an object is inserted in the lock, and the person is jimmying it back and forth with a lot of force. I instinctively turn around and head to my bedside safe, unlock it with a combination, and pull out my .357 SIG pistol, load a 14-round magazine, and chamber a hollow point round. I head back to the door, and as I exit the bedroom, I see the lock twist and unlatch. I immediately pointed my weapon straight ahead, knowing that if someone comes through, I will have to make a split-second decision. I decide that if someone comes through the door, I will give them a momentary chance to retreat, but if they do anything other than that, or enter aggressively, I'm going to shoot and ask questions later. They don't enter. However, because I had also locked the deadbolt inside only, when I first moved in a year prior, I remember thinking that the deadbolt was a great security feature, and I got in the habit of always keeping it locked when I'm home. In hindsight, this decision saved me from a life or death confrontation. Upon realizing that, I approached the door and looked through the keyhole. On the other side are 3 people, 2 men and 1 woman. All 3 are wearing hoodies, so it's difficult to make out their faces. The men have their objects in their hands, but I can't make out exactly what. The 2 men are talking back and forth, probably trying to figure out why they can't open the door, even though they have successfully opened the outside lock at this point. The woman is also talking loudly behind the 2 men, such that anyone in the hallway would be able to hear her voice. She's talking in another language, and the only words I can make out are blah 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 blah, apartment 250, blah blah blah, and she keeps repeating that over and over like a broken record. Upon hearing that, I start to wonder for a moment if maybe they're just drunk and have the wrong apartment number, but that's impossible. To open my lock, they would have to have a copy of my exact key or some kind of lock-picking device. I've never copied my key or given it to anyone. Here's the other thing, not only is 250 not my apartment number, but as I figured out later, the apartment number doesn't exist anywhere in the complex. Standing back from the door, I take a long broom handle and jab it hard into the face of the door, letting them know that I'm on the other side. They immediately stop fiddling with the lock and take off running. I debate whether to call 911 and decide against it unless they return. I know they'll be long gone by the time anyone gets here. It'd be too risky to follow them to try to get a better description or a license plate, and I didn't have enough identifying info as it is to make an arrest. I filed a police report the next day and let the apartment management know. They said it was unusual, but they would alert the resource officer and ask for a police presence for a couple of nights. Nothing ever came of the report, but that's not a surprise to me. It's been 7 months since this happened and no further incidents. Nobody else in the apartment has reported anything similar happening. I don't think they'll be back, but one precaution I took was to buy a smart lock for the deadbolt, so I can leave that deadbolt always locked from the inside, even when I'm not home. It's crazy to think that the deadbolt was the only thing between myself and an armed confrontation with intruders. They say you don't really know what you'll do in those situations until it really happens, but I can honestly say I'm proud of how I stayed calm and was mentally prepared to defend myself. If there's one good thing that came out of this, I feel confident that I responded the right way, and I was ready for the unthinkable. So 3 a.m. burglars, for your own sake, please find a safer way to make a living. There's nothing in my apartment worth dying for. This happened to me on Friday, December 23rd, 2011. I'm a woman in my early 40s and I live in an urban area known for violence, but I live in a rather decent part of town, on a quiet, dead-end street. It was early evening but dark outside, and I was at my car parked in my driveway. I was cleaning out my car because I was about to take some people to the airport, and I was really trying to hide the fact that my car can get messy. I have 2 dogs, so that's my excuse and I'm sticking to it. I was just finishing up when a car drives up the street past me, turns around in the cul-de-sac, and then drops someone off about 2 houses up from me. I noticed the car, and I noticed the man, but 0 red flags were raised because I thought he'd been dropped off and was going into a nearby house. Also, he was incredibly casual. It's the one thing I feel shame in regards to this whole situation, that he didn't raise any red flags inside me. How could I have been so oblivious? I know better. I walked from my driveway around the front landscaped area into my stairs. I had heard him behind me, but assumed he was just walking down the sidewalk to pass me. Just about the time I got to my stairs, the hair on my neck stood up and I got goosebumps. I tried to turn around, but it was too late. One hand grabbed my shoulder and the one hand pressed something hard into my back, and he kept me in the forward-facing position. He was way taller than me, and I felt him lean down to whisper, "Shut up or get cut." I could smell booze on his breath, and let me tell you that being stabbed or killed with a knife is honestly my absolute worst fear of fears. I've always had nightmares about getting stabbed to death. I had just been to the bathroom a few minutes before, but I was so scared that, even so, I let go a tiny bit of urine. I wish my bladder had been full. Maybe he would have been disgusted and run off. He kept hold of my shoulder and kept something in my back, and he pushed me upstairs and into my house. As we got inside, I tried to say something, hoping my tenant was home, who lives across the hall in his own unit, but he said, "Shut up," through clenched teeth. The tenant wasn't home anyway. I live alone with 2 dogs, though both of them were frolicking in the backyard and didn't come inside while this was going on. I'm glad of that because my smallest one, 20 pounds, is a fearless little dog and would have bit the shit out of the guy and might have gotten hurt or killed. Little guy actually did bite a mugger once, but that's another story. My lab would have probably run over for pets because she loves absolutely everyone, even potential rapists. Once he pushed me into the house and looked around, while still holding me, I could tell that he was disappointed because I heard him say, "shit," under his breath. I don't have a flat screen TV or other fancy equipment. I live simply and frugally. I have a 15-year-old TV and a Wii, both of which live in a closet, and a 20-year-old bookshelf, CD radio player, and a MacBook, and that's it. I don't do Christmas, so there was no tree and no presents either. He pushed me into the bedroom, which is right off the living room, no hallway between them, and then shoved me away from him toward my bed. I remained standing, but I finally got to turn around. I was terrified to look at him in the eye. I didn't want to aggravate him. I concentrated on his shoes, his very distinctive shoes that I was able to later identify. I also got a good look at the huge knife he was holding, and a new wave of adrenaline shot through me. It made my eyes kind of feel blurry, and I felt dizzy. I felt like I couldn't get enough air, but I was breathing heavily at the time. My knees felt weak, and I felt my insides were like jelly, and that I was going to vomit. I've never been more scared in my life than in that moment. I told him to take whatever he wanted, but please leave me alone. And that's when he said, "Take off your pants." And he stuck his hands down his pants to start rubbing himself. I said, "Okay, but I have AIDS, and you need to use a condom." "I have some." "I actually don't, but I was hoping to avoid getting an STD or AIDS if I survived this." He smirked. "I've heard that one before. Get him off." And 2 thoughts went through my head at the same time. He's definitely done this before. God damn, he's calm. He was too calm. He wasn't breathing heavily. Voice wasn't strained, and he wasn't sweating. This was just another day at the office for this waste of human flesh. And just then, by the way he was saying things, something about his tone and his attitude, I absolutely knew he was going to kill me, then rob me, in that order. Dead certain. I've never been more sure of anything. Then the oddest thing happened. In the span of about 3 seconds, I calmed right down, and I got clarity. My mind was clear and clean. I could see, taste, smell, and think like a god, or a goddess in this case. I realized it was just adrenaline, but I've never felt anything like it. I stopped shaking, and I stood there marveling at the new feeling for a moment, before he repeated the order to take off my pants. So I did. I was about to get all sweet and coy and say I'm so glad you came over tonight, etc. The plan was to lay down on the bed while talking to him, and then wait for the right moment to pull out my gun, that I have attached to a custom holster on the back of the nightstand. I was going to shoot him point blank in the temple if I had to. Luckily I didn't have to do that, because as soon as I took off my pants, I think he thought he had me under control. And that's when he did the oddest thing. He turned around and started rummaging in the living room, opening the china cabinet and closet. He was only out of my line of sight for about 3 seconds, but that gave me enough time to reach for the gun. It's a .38 revolver with no funny business about cocking it or safeties. It's just point and pull the trigger. I had the gun raised and level at him by the time he came back to the doorway, and my hands were not shaking. I said, "You better get out of here, motherfucker." I didn't even get a chance to finish the sentence because he reacted instantly. "Oh shit," he said, as he headed for the door faster than you could believe. I followed him out, locked the door, and went to put on my pants and then called the police. Though the police got there within a few minutes, they were unable to catch the guy. He still hasn't been caught, and I doubt he will be. They were unable to lift prints on a few things that he touched. I was completely unhurt physically and mentally, and I'm recovering just fine.